Hey, everybody, you are watching and listening to the We Are Rizin podcast. This is your host, Andrew Benjamin, and I'm joined by my co host, who is now in the dark right now, Jay Christian Gary from Focus Fights.
Hey y'all, how's it going?
Ah, there you are. There you are. You had me scared for a second. I thought you disappeared. Um, but yeah, we have a very special guest today. Making her Bloodsport debut at Bloodsport 6. KZT will be taking on Janai Kai. KZT also has wrestled for Women of Wrestling, but under a different name, of course. I'll let them guess that. I'll let them figure that out for themselves. But KZT, thank you so much for talking to us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you guys for having me on board today. I'm really excited to dive into chatting with you guys.
So tell us about a little bit about yourself. How did you get involved in the crazy world of professional wrestling?
So probably a bit of a different route than most. I actually only started becoming a fan of professional wrestling probably within the last 5 years, and it came about because I was actually art director for a network called Access TV, who used to produce a program, New Japan Pro Wrestling. And so I was in charge of basically coming up with all the creative concepts for marketing and branding that channel, and specifically that program. And as I got more acquainted with it and just had to watch it for everything that I had to do for work, I was just like, this is what's been missing my entire life. Like I've come from a martial arts background. I've been an MMA fan for as long as I can remember. But when I started getting a little bit jaded about like MMA towards in the last few years, and when I discovered New Japan, I was like, why is this so captivating and why is this so amazing? And so I kind of became obsessed like very quickly and just like kind of dove into that world um pretty deeply. And then the so I got into actual wrestling because we then Access TV then acquired a show called Wow Women of Wrestling, and the executive producer of the show knew about, obviously we'd worked together and marketing the content and whatever. He just suggested to me that, knowing my background, that I should audition for the show. And at first I was a bit hesitant because I was like, I'm just, I'm not, that just didn't really feel right to me. But then the more I thought about it, the more I couldn't deny that that's what I wanted to do. So, I auditioned for the show, and then they had me on board starting, and I started to train with them pretty much within the week. So that's pretty much how I got into like actually becoming a wrestler. So just basically being a fan and just getting into wrestling through Wow Women of Wrestling.
We can understand that, ma'am. A lot of us are like that because when it comes down to, our first love for combat sports, especially for those trying to get into it as a competitor, we tend to be fans more often than not because, you know, there's a big interest in loving the sport instead of just saying, oh, that's weak, that's for nerds, and why would you want to watch this weird stuff?
Yeah. And I actually, when I started getting to MMA, I trained to do an MMA fight for about 6 months. But then I broke my nose in training, and I was like, yeah, I'm okay with not doing this anymore. So I sort of diverted from that path and just focused on just more of the jiu-jitsu path, which is my martial arts background. So yeah, I totally get that.
Wow. Understood, ma'am, understood. Now, as far as how you cut your teeth in the world of combat sports, obviously you had to train to get there, but starting out, competing and wrestling, I mean, obviously this was before you competed on Women of Wrestling, the reboot Women of Wrestling
Yeah.
for Access TV. I mean, what was it like just starting out, getting your foot in the door?
In terms of getting the foot my
In
foot.
terms of basically putting your name out there?
I've never really been one for like self-branding. Like I always like to think that my work speaks for itself, and I just tried to get like in terms of competing, like I just wanted to get my name out there as much as possible. So I would be on the competition circuit for jiu-jitsu every weekend, you know, from white belt through to like pretty much brown belt. And I would just be trying to cut my teeth just by like throwing myself right in the deep end and, you know, testing my skills against like, you know, the best in the world. And um, really just letting my technique and my skills speak for itself. And you know, I like to just I'm pretty introverted, I guess, as just a personality. So I'm not one to like really boast or like talk myself up, but yeah, I just getting there and like to get my hands dirty, and I feel like that just is probably a greater reflection of like who I am, like overall, outside of just competing and outside of being a combat athlete.
Understood. Andrew?
Yeah, my apologies. I had my microphone on mute, so that's why I looked like I asked something and nothing came out. But I was gonna bring up, you are a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, correct? Right?
That is correct. Yes.
That's under Cobrihina, I think, right?
Cabrina. Yes.
Cobra,
Yeah.
yeah. What is it like training under him? Because he's considered one of the best lighter weight jiu-jitsu guys in the world. I'm proud of that. I forgot his weight. I think it was 155, 165, maybe even
He's
less.
he's a featherweight. I think I'm pretty sure that's 160. No, 155. Yeah. I can't really remember the guys like actual like weight numbers, but he is considered one of the best featherweights in the history of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I've been training with him for over 10 years, and it is, you know, I started there just as like a fresh blue belt. As soon as like I basically moved to America, I started training with him, and I've lived here for about 10 years now. So been a student of his ever since his school opened in Los Angeles. And it, you know, it's just like I'm every day in class, it's like I'm just in awe of like the knowledge and the experience that I get to absorb from someone who is just absolutely just knows the game from not just like a technical and you know, sort of just, you know, on the mats, but just from like a emotional and the psychological like point of view as martial artists. And to me, like that's like so intriguing that like someone who is like that successful can be so knowledgeable in just all aspects of what it takes to be at that, you know, that higher level of a competitor in, you know, your chosen sport. So absolute honor every time I step on the mats at my dojo.
Do you prefer gi or no gi?
I am probably 80% gi, 20% no gi. I do love no gi. It's like it is bit of a different game. But you know, I cut my teeth in the gi, so it'll always be my bread and butter, and always where I feel most comfortable and at home. So, but you know, I do love to scrap in no gi as well. So
I know that you did compete. I think for IBJJF, I think it was. And
yeah.
yeah. So when you compete, is it do you just find the gi just more like you can grab more stuff? You know, you're a lot. There's a lot
Yeah.
more. You can like with no gi. Obviously, you're just grabbing an arm or a wrist, the back of the
Yeah.
head. Is that why you like
Yeah.
the gi? Just because
I
opportunities?
I mean, I actually my martial arts journey started in Australia, and I started out in traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu. So um, it was in the gi. So uh, as a result, when I transitioned to BJJ, it just, you know, felt natural to me. So I just feel a little bit more at home with the gi. But it's interesting that you mentioned that there's like more to grab onto, because you know, as a creative person, I just like having like different tools and stuff. And I've always thought of martial arts as just as an extension of like that creative part of my brain that I can express. It just happens to be a different canvas, you know, canvas being like the ring or the mat. And you know, having the gi is an extra like tool, like, you know, like an extra sort of, you know, medium that I can use to express my art, so to speak.
Well,
So
actually, I want to also ask as well, as somebody who's both involved in I guess is it graphic design? Is that what it be? What you kind of do? Is that
Pretty
kind of
much, yeah. Like I guess, like specifically it would be motion graphics. So it's like
okay?
things that are on screen that move. But like I'm trained, or like I graduated with a graphic design degree, so I'm like I guess.
But they like the stuff that catches people's eyes. That's supposed to be palatable to the eyes, I guess, maybe.
Yeah.
But that goes hand in hand with wrestling because
Mhm.
I noticed that a lot of when it comes to like pro wrestling merchandise, some wrestlers get it and other
Mhm.
people don't. I'm curious to know, what is it that a lot of pro wrestlers, when like they have their pro wrestling tees, things or whatever, what is
Mm.
something that you see as like a common mistake when it comes to just their designs of t-shirts? Is there something that
Um,
just doesn't, as somebody who's in that field, you're like,
right.
"Ugh, I wouldn't do it like that."
Um, I mean, I guess I would call myself a bit of a design snob. Like I'm constantly looking at things and like critiquing them. Um, my personal pet peeve, would be just like when you see a wrestling tee that just looks like a wrestling tee. It's like so generic. It's like it's almost like you've just like got a template of like wrestlingteedesigns.com and just like switch the name out. So if you're trying to like market yourself or like stand out, like I would feel like that would be your first point of like reference to differentiate yourself in the market, is to make something that doesn't stereotypically look like a cookie cutter wrestling t-shirt. But other than that, just like general things like bad typography, like bad illustrations of faces on like the t-shirt. Like if it's done in a way that's obviously like terrible and like you're trying to make it like kind of kitschy and like look awful, then great. Like I love that. But if it's I can't stand if it's not like just well illustrated. Like it just looks like a Microsoft Paint kind of job that's just slapped onto a t-shirt. But I could go on for hours about my graphic design pet peeves, especially relating to wrestling. But we only have so much time tonight.
Well, I think that'll be a good change of topic. Let's talk about Bloodsport 6. Um, I always say this, that being invited to a or being asked to wrestle on a Bloodsport show is kind of like it kind of like is being invited to like it's all like the clubhouse or something. Not everybody gets to go into a Bloodsport show.
Basically, Andrew, what you're saying is being invited to a Bloodsport card is like being invited to probably one of the greatest dojos known to man or womankind, and you just have no choice but to accept it.
Basically, yeah, it's like the clubhouse for personally, in my personal opinion. So yeah, just talk about how did Josh Barnett reach out to you? Did you ever train with him before? Is that how you know him? Yeah, how did this whole offer come about?
So I actually met Josh when I was working at Access TV. Like he was one of the commentators on New Japan. So we worked closely together there, and obviously, just through conversation, just found out about like my experience and my background in martial arts, and obviously like my increasing love for professional wrestling, and we just kept in contact after like that sort of relationship with the network and New Japan like sort of dissolved, and I then started to train with him sort of occasionally, and I feel like that was sort of like the evolution of how that all came about. We'd sort of kept in contact, and he knew about how like sort of my background, and then as I was training with him, everything sort of started to sort of morph into this direction. But I do specifically remember being at the Bloodsport in New Jersey like a couple of years ago, sitting, and I hadn't even started training at that point. I think I just maybe thought about starting to step into the ring. And when I was sitting in the audience watching Bloodsport and seeing everything sort of unfold before my eyes, I said to myself, like, this is made for me. Like, this is where I want to be, like, as a professional wrestler. Like, this is my perfect outlet for what I want to do. And 2 years later, here I am. So, I really can't, I'm completely grateful, and just still sort of have to like kind of shock myself into reality that it's actually happening. But, I'm absolutely stoked to be, part of the card, and just for this opportunity.
So tell us your thoughts on your opponent, Janai Kai. She does have I believe, a Taekwondo background, and she does have a lot more pro wrestling experience than you. Can you just tell her if you've done any research on her, and just tell us what you think about her?
Well, I mean, from all looks of things, she's a very technical fighter. She obviously is a black belt in a martial art as well. So it's it's a perfect sort of matchup of like grappler versus striker, which it's just, it brings me back to like the original UFCs, and just the original origins of like mixed martial arts, where you pit two kind of like martial arts up against each other. And from what I can see, she's like extremely skilled. So I'm just really excited to get in there and to test my skills against someone who is equally as skilled, but just with a different discipline, and to see how my grappling holds up against that. And, I'm confident that I have what it takes to really make myself shine, and for really just to be a great showcase of like, two technicians in their own field, just to go out there and show the world like what we can do.
Is that the type of pro wrestling that you enjoy? Because most pro wrestling, there's theatrics, antics that go on. Do you prefer, because you said you became a fan of or more of a fan when you were watching New Japan Pro Wrestling, and what's not, no, New Japan Pro Wrestling, they have their antics occasionally, but there's a balance where where the wrestling is the wrestling, and it's kind of like the antics, those they don't happen. They don't infiltrate like a main event or a co-main event. It's you'll see them during like the tag matches or something. So not. Is this the type of pro wrestling that you personally enjoy? Just kind of like a showcase of skills, see who is the better man or woman in the end.
Well, I mean, that's what, to me, professional wrestling is. It is a showcase of who is going to be the better person in the ring at that given time. And I love all styles of professional wrestling. Obviously, WoW Women of Wrestling is a completely different style. And when I started training there, it was really exciting for me, because it was a whole set of new like physical challenges, of applying like my athleticism into like a completely different canvas, as it were. But in terms of something like Bloodsport, like it just made the most sense. Like for me, it was just the most exciting for me, because it was really just the perfect marriage of who I am as as an athlete as well as a performer, and just like even just like down to the aesthetics of like the whole thing. Like it just makes a lot of sense for who I am, and absolutely it's the kind of direction that I see myself going into, as I develop more as a wrestler and a performer in that in that realm. So I use that term lightly.
Now with this fight, and now you did mention that it is kind of striker versus grappler. I almost want to say like, if you go into a match where you expected to grapple, it's kind of giving away what you're gonna do. Do you feel though that like for a match like this, you kind of have to almost, as I say, flip the script and you become the striker. The grappler becomes the striker type of thing. Yeah, is that something that you're prepared to possibly do?
I have trained in stand-up for quite a few years, like not so much recently, but definitely in my earliest stages of my training, it was a lot of like striking and specifically like Thai boxing. So I am very confident that I can at least hang in that world to be able to then go into my world. So in terms of like, not to give away too much of a game plan, but in terms like of a strategy, that's probably like where my head would be sort of thinking, is that I would use like my fundamentals of like stand up to then get into my world of grappling, which is where I feel like I would excel over like anyone that anyone would put in front of me. So,
Now, one of the cool things also about Bloodsport is that wrestlers come in. Some look like they're ready for a street fight. Others, they actually look like they got the uniform. I'm curious to know, any plans to potentially wear the gi for Bloodsport?
no gi for Bloodsport.
Oh, no, okay.
Not well. I mean, that wasn't the plan, but maybe, I don't know. Actually, yeah, you put an idea in my head.
Well, here's the other thing as well. If you wear the gi, but she doesn't, then you're at the disadvantage in that case.
Exactly. But if she wants to put on the uniform, I'm all about it. Like, that's my world. So
I think that'll be the first Bloodsport, if I'm correct, where two of the wrestlers would be wearing the gi, which would make it for make for a very interesting dynamic. It really would.
It would actually be like a pretty amazing visual.
And also, it will stand out from all the rest of the matches, because I doubt anybody else. I don't think Josh Barnett or John Moxley's wearing a gi. Actually, well, maybe, I don't know. Maybe Moxley.
I mean, anything could happen.
Curious to know as well, just your thoughts on the main event, Barnett versus Moxley. Seems like this fight's been like brewing for like 10 years at this point.
Right.
I mean, come to think of it, Andrew, before we even talk about the main event of that card, I mean, obviously it's not like Chavo Guerrero Jr. or Rocky Romero will be wearing a gi.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, they're probably going to take all that shit from Talking Shopomania and just roll it up into a little ball into making their match look competitive.
It's possible, yeah. But yeah, event.
What are your thoughts about the main event of this fight card? John Moxley versus Josh Barnett.
I think it's going to be an all-out brawl. Like, I think it's going to be just. It might sound technical, but I feel like with like my knowledge of both of the fighters' backgrounds, that it's going to end up just wild and just all out mad street fight style, which I can't wait for. I obviously, coming at it as a fan, like that's what I want to see. But I honestly feel like that's where it's going to end up, and I'm sure there's going to be blood involved.
Oh, it's probably
Bloodsport.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Lots of blood.
Oh yeah, definitely. Listen, it'll put the blood in Bloodsport, probably.
That should be the tagline for that main event.
But be careful. Don't let that happen during your match. You already said you got a broken nose once. Don't let that happen again for a second time. As somebody who had a broken nose, I know what it's like, and it's listen. Once it starts bleeding, you can't stop it.
It's like a
come on, Andrew.
fire hydrant out of your face. I'm like, wow. I never thought
basically. Andrew, you're basically saying that shit like it's a bad thing.
Oh,
when you see blood, you're supposed to be like a shark in the water, man.
Not when it's your blood. That's when you become, I don't know, a guppy who's or like a seahorse or something that's trying to get out of there.
I will say that, like, in those kind of moments when, like, things like that have happened to me, there is that moment of like adrenaline where you're just like, fuck it, just gonna push it back in place and just keep going. But as the adrenaline wears off and you actually get a sense of what the fuck has just happened, you're like, holy shit, this is really fucked up, and I can really start feeling the pain now.
Oh yes.
Not fun. So.
And your nose is like enlarged, or in my case, it was like crooked. So yeah, like as soon as that adrenaline's over, suddenly it's like you feel it. Yeah.
Yeah. But adrenaline is a great thing for a short amount of time.
So I'm just curious to know, do you win or lose with this match, do you have any interest in doing pro wrestling, or is there do you kind of want just to do the occasional match, or I don't know if WoW is still, if they're still around?
WoW is still definitely a thing. We are like actually ramping it back up to kick back up soon, hopefully, towards the end of the year. So there's that's definitely in my horizon, but as much as I can get myself out there as a professional wrestler, the better. And I really feel that with my skill set and with the things that I am learning, within the realms of like a traditional professional wrestling, that I really have something to offer
Mm.
the
And you know what?
the world.
Oh, okay, but speaking of that promotion, Women of Wrestling, obviously you're wrestling in the revamped version of it. I don't know if Access TV is going to be wanting to bring it back, but hey, I hope that they do. In the meantime, when it comes down to, Women of Wrestling, obviously you're wrestling for the revamp, but I don't know. Did you ever see like the first version of Women of Wrestling, the one that ended in 2001 with that god awful pay per view at the Forum in LA?
I have seen footage of that, yes.
I mean, I'm just asking
It's
because I know that obviously this version, the one that has been around for at least the last few years, it's a
mhm,
lot different than that original version that was
absolutely.
just a complete clusterfuck.
I would say, it was just a different time. It was a different style, and it pandered to the audiences that were after that at the time. And I feel like that with the current inception of Women of Wrestling, it's a lot
Mhm.
more. There's a lot more sort of athletes that are involved. Everyone's very skilled, and it's also a lot more character driven. So, which is what I love about the concept is, you really get to just indulge in expressing yourself, in a manner that you normally wouldn't, like in on like the indie circuit or whatever. But there's fun, just colorful characters, and the storylines are really just I love the concept of it, and I think it's a great platform for just women to just have another outlet for their wrestling creativity, so to speak.
Hmm. Basically kind of like what Invicta was. I mean, what Invicta is for MMA, right?
Yeah, I mean, I love Invicta. I think it's a great showcase for, especially for the up and coming women fighters. But you see a lot more personalities. They get they're a lot more of a platform to just be themselves and just have a little bit more fun with getting out there and showcasing themselves that you normally wouldn't see with something like within the UFC, which is a lot more obviously streamlined to their brand and the way that they do things. But yeah, that's like a nice analogy actually. I like that.
Mm. I
Right.
actually, I think would be a good topic to also talk about when, in terms of women in wrestling. And
Mhm.
one thing I want to ask you, as a woman who is a pro wrestler, it's the 1 year, I don't know if you want anniversary or 1 year of
It's
speaking out.
been a full year since the whole speaking out controversy, basically labeling some members of the professional wrestling industry for their true colors, for them being
Mhm.
not only homophobic or racist, but also sexist towards women. And we don't want to name some of the biggest offenders that have been a part of this shit because they're all scum and they don't deserve to be mentioned. But
Mhm.
when you look back at the whole speaking out movement and how it started, I mean, what were your thoughts about, some of the consequences and transgressions that have transpired because of all these, miserable pieces of shit? I'll just say it
Mhm.
like that. Basically showing their true colors. And do you think that the professional wrestling industry has changed by weeding all those assholes out?
I absolutely think that the movement was necessary because it just, I feel like it came at a time where women had just had enough of like accepting that a certain manner, or like a certain sort of behavior was like expected to be tolerated as a woman in professional wrestling, that you had to like deal with certain kinds of like sexist and just basically abusive behaviors. And you know um having this platform just meant that um you're calling these pieces of shit out, and then like people are just going to be a lot more accountable, and they're not going to think that just because they are in this position of so-called power, being someone that's in the spotlight of you know adoring fans that they can just get away with anything. Like a lot more people are just going to be a lot more sort of cautious of their actions than so they should be. Like it's just made people a lot more aware of like how they carry themselves. I'm not just not just men, like obviously the majority of it being men, but just across the board, just people just being accountable for their actions and not just thinking they can get away with being assholes. And
or
I think
people basically enabling that behavior, right?
exactly. So so yeah, I like a year on, I feel like a lot more people are sort of weary to shady behavior, and they're not going to tolerate it. And they people that are even thinking about acting like shitty are going to know that there's going to be consequences to this shit. So so yeah, a year on, I feel like it's been a progressive year. As shitty as the year has been, like things like that have really given women a voice and a platform to know that they don't have to tolerate this shit just because they want to be involved in very much a male dominated industry.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, that could probably not only go for professional wrestling, but for all forms of entertainment, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've like worked in pretty much entertainment, like as soon as I've been in the workforce, so I see it. I mean, it's obviously very concentrated in certain forms of entertainment, like professional wrestling being one of them. But it definitely is across the boards of like many industries that I've been a part of.
Right, right. And I mean, Andrew can understand that because he himself is a SAG actor, certified actor, and he can, see half of that shit going on just a regular day, some of that shady shit. But still, when it comes down to that, I feel that the whole speaking out movement has been a welcome change of pace because, some guys who think they have power, or some guys who just, carry it around themselves like they think this shit don't stink. I mean, it's finally cool to see these guys get weeded out for their consequences, but it's also, pathetic just to see these guys basically have their woe is me sob stories and say, oh, I didn't know this person was like this, and I didn't know that I didn't know that it was wrong for me to do this, and then putting out hour-long rants, basically,
Yeah.
putting themselves in a light like I can do no wrong. But it's just sad that these, and I'm gonna say it again, miserable pieces of shit, just saying, woe is me, when really they should have been the ones, to not pull that shit off and not pull the wool over the sheep's clothing and all that.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have I actually got two questions from a listener, watcher, our good friend Mark Q from WMMA News, Wombat MMA News. He actually has two questions for you, KZT. First question: we have seen more Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu catch wrestling crossover and pro wrestling recently, especially of wrestlers like Thunder Rosa, Shayna Baszler, and Tay Conti. How is it to do a match like this, which is a heavier mix of both?
Sorry, can you just ask that last
Oh, sorry.
question?
How is it to do a match like this, which is a heavier mix of both? I guess he's talking about the Bloodsport style, which is kind of,
Right.
which is BJJ. Well, it can include BJJ, but also catch wrestling. Yeah, just talk about that crossover. And we're also seeing a lot of wrestlers on television, like he just mentioned, implementing that into their
Right.
regimen.
Well, I mean, I feel like it's just it's a for me, it's a natural sort of like marriage of the worlds. It is, it's a grappling art, like Brazilian jiu-jitsu is a grappling art. Wrestling is a grappling art. And so to mix the two worlds, it just makes sense. And for something that's like where it's so concentrated, like Bloodsport, it just becomes like really, great opportunity to really showcase the technical aspect of what you might not normally see in like a very story driven kind of like outlet, like, like you would see on Raw or AEW or whatever. So it's for the way that I see Bloodsport is like it's like a showcase of like how technical a lot of these athletes actually are, and it's just like that platform to just be able to showcase that. So
Mhm.
I hope that answers the question.
And his second question, you'll get a laugh out of this, I think. You are currently the graphic designer for the U.S. broadcasts of New Japan. How did you get the job, and what has been your favorite part of the job?
So I'm actually not anymore. So I don't actually work for Access TV anymore. But when I did, it was probably one of the best products I've ever worked on. It was I got the job by being the art director at Access TV. So it was one of the things, like one of the projects that I had to work on, and it was one of our highest rating shows. So obviously we had a lot of focus on that, and the highlights were just being able to work with the wrestlers on shoots, and then coming up with creative concepts that would just allow for that kind of for Japanese wrestling to be seen on American television. Like it can be sort of seen as kind of like a niche thing, but what we wanted to do with it was really expand it to like more of a general audience. Like if you like wrestling, you're really going to love this, and not make it just about well, it's just a bunch of Japanese wrestlers. It's like, hey, this is like actually a really entertaining product, like you should check it out, kind of thing. For people that weren't sort of necessarily aware of it at the time. But yeah, I guess that's how I got into it. So I hope that answers that question.
Mm-hmm. And this is not gonna be the last question, but it's because I always like to end on good notes with our shows, but I think it's an important question topic to ask about. Being that you are of Asian background.
Especially given the fact that there's been a lot of crazy shit that's happened, especially as of this recording over the last week, at least in this country. But considering the fact that you are of Asian descent, I mean, there was some shit that happened in Atlanta this past week involving 6 Asian women getting murdered by some fucking psychopath. And in conjunction with that, there has been a lot of, discrimination towards those of Asian heritage, not just in the US or probably not in the oceanic region where you're originally from, but all over the world outside of Asia.
Right.
Since the pandemic began. I mean, we just want to ask, what have been your overall thoughts since the pandemic happened about, you know, Asians being attacked in the public eye, and more importantly about what happened last week? Do you think that now is the time where the world needs to realize that, hey, Asians need to stand up and, speak up for themselves, basically?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, it's obviously something that I've been thinking about and just pondering over and pontificating over especially over the last week. Ever since the pandemic happened a year ago, I just, from my experience as an Asian growing up in like, a English speaking country, like, I was born in Australia, so I actually I've never, lived in Asia at all, other than visiting a couple of times on vacation. But I kind of, in the back of my mind, had a feeling that something like this might happen, because when shit hits the fan, everyone needs a scapegoat. So this was like the obvious scapegoat. And I just, I had it in the back of my mind, and it's disappointing that like that's how it's all unfolding, that, you know, people are actually like playing out to their most kind of base desires of like lashing out to, especially to people that are not able to defend themselves, like, you know, elderly, and like, you know, stabbing people in the back and stuff like that. Like, it's pretty disgusting to me that that would be your expression of your anger at the situation of the world. Like, so, you know, a couple of things, just on the really awful thing that happened in Atlanta last week, and the sort of spike in attacks that have just happened. I feel like just in the last week, because like, I don't know, every time I turn on, like I go on the news or turn on Twitter, there's like another example of something that's happened. But it's always these fucking cowards that will just attack someone that they know that won't be able to defend themselves. And like, it makes me really mad, because like, if it was me, obviously I would just be wanting to throw hands and just get in and like, you know, fuck shit up. Like, but like, when I think to like, you know, these people could be like my parents, or like, you know, any members of my family that couldn't defend themselves, like, it just enrages me, and it just makes me I guess I'm just like really disappointed and just sad at the whole situation, and I feel really helpless. Like, it's like, I know what I could do, like if it was the situation happened to me, but as a general overall you know, thought on it all, I feel like the same thing just keeps getting said over and over, in terms of not just racism, just like recently, but just throughout history. It's like, we have to learn to be better. We have to learn to like educate and, you know, speak up about these things. But like, how many freaking times do we have to have this conversation? And it just seems to happen like just in cycles. So, you know, after 9/11 in 2001, the racism was directed at Middle Easterners, and then it would transition to another like minority group, like Mexicans, when like, you know, Trump was like started becoming president.
He was basically calling, you know, Latinos rapists, criminals, and drug dealers.
Exactly.
And especially, you know, when it comes down to people of my ilk, of the African American community, we pretty much get the shit end of the stick every time we get talked about in a positive way.
Yeah, it's there's always a scapegoat to like to point the finger at, or to try and like put the focus on when like the shit hits the fan. And even when the shit doesn't hit the fan, like with, you know, the plight of African Americans since like basically the beginning of this country, like, it's just, I'm like, I'm just like frustrated. It's like, how many fucking times do we have to have this fucking conversation that racism is just sucks, and like, are people ever going to learn, or are people just like inherently just that stupid, that like and cowardly, like this is how like things are just going to keep going? So I'm kind of like at a wit's end with it all, and you know, yeah, I have no words really. I mean, at this point, it's just I want to be, you know, I want to say all the things, like, you know, educate and speak up and all that sort of stuff, but at the same time, I'm just like so disheartened and so disappointed in just like humanity in general, that you know, it just makes me real sad. And you know, I'm not gonna lie, like I spent at least an hour a day crying about shit, like this shit, like for the last kind of couple of weeks, and that's just kind of like the state of existence these days, right? But
I mean, I can understand that, Miss Tran, especially again considering the fact that I'm of African American descent. I mean, it just sucks, especially considering the fact that people of color, you know, it's like we always gotta look a little more careful whenever we see the police, or we always gotta look a little more careful when people are, you know, hurling racial epithets towards us, and try not to lose our cool, because in a way, one little fuck up could either cost you your freedom or your life. And I just feel like what the fuck happened in Atlanta is just a main example of that, especially with these douchebag officers saying, oh, he just had a bad day. he was basically caught on by sex addiction. Bullshit. No motherfucker where they had sex. Basically, what I'm saying is no dumb motherfucker saying, he's addicted to sex would ever murder 8 people. No motherfucker would say, he had a bad day and would just go ahead and kill 8 people from this fucking society. I mean, shit, I have bad days all the time. I'm sure you do. Obviously, Andrew does as well. But we wouldn't fucking waste our time trying, to off 8 people from this earth or more because we got better shit to do. And I'm sorry for the rant, Miss Tran, but still, the point of the matter is, it's just crazy with it's just crazy with the way society has been, and we just don't need to be shy anymore. We need to just speak up for ourselves and, be more inclusive when it comes down to, things about race relations and, being respected in this country because it's high fucking time that, shit like this, like what happened in Atlanta, needs to be prevented. And I'm sorry for getting on the rant.
No,
Andrew's probably cringing, waiting for me to get this shit over with, but still, that's just how I feel.
I guess just to just as like my final thoughts on the matter is like, you're absolutely right. Like everyone is pretty much at their wits' end, and it's just got to a point where we don't have a choice but to like call people out on their shit. And just like with the speaking out movement, it's like enough's enough. Like no more fucking like just glossing over these incidents anymore.
I was honestly trying to hold back tears for what you were saying because it's what you brought up a very good point, and that's what got me was you saying you'd be ready to throw hands, and I honestly think that is something that needs to be taught. Did you hear about the story about the older Asian lady who beat that guy, and I'm just thinking, you know what, good. I just think
that guy. So the guy that attacked the elder Asian lady was the one that ended up on the stretcher being like
exactly. And
I think that happened in San Francisco, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm not like trying to like celebrate that incident. Obviously, it's absolutely disgusting, but like that's
there's just a time where I think people gotta stand up for themselves, and that's one of the reasons why I always admired the bullied kid who went to martial arts and then became UFC heavyweight champion because and that's one thing as a martial artist I would hope I hope that these incidents it encourages people to go into jiu-jitsu. It encourages people to go into taekwondo, kickboxing, so that people can defend themselves. Because if there's one thing I've learned is that these people who do this stuff, as soon as you stand up to them, they cower. They do
because they're cowards. They're absolute 110% cowards. They're weak cowards.
And then when they're not in control, that's when they ball up or whatever, So I, just, without going on too much of my own rant, I advocate that people should, of any age, should take up a martial art, some sort of self-defense, because if you're never going to use it, it can at least give you the confidence in case you ever have to use it. Because
that's 100% it. As a martial artist, we're always told that you shouldn't have to. It's actually teaching you to be a better person to actually not have to use that. Mm-hmm. But if you have to, then you better be ready to take it all the way to the end. So,
like I said, we're not going to end. We're not going to end on.
Also as a martial artist, you got to learn how to control yourself because you don't want people to think, it's lift every voice and sing, then lift every fist and swing.
But like I said before, we're not going to end on a sad note. I'm going to end this on a happy note. And I wanted to get your thoughts, KZT. Foster's, best Australian beer, or is that bad marketing on America?
Oh, God.
Have you ever tasted Foster's?
I have, and it's disgusting.
Yeah. So let me let you in on a little secret here. I don't know a single Australian that would actually willingly drink Foster's. There are so 110 better beer options in Australia than Foster's, and kudos to them for like a great marketing that it's convinced every single American like that's the only beer that Australians drink. But no, it's
Well,
horrible.
you know how
It's
that's
camel's piss back home.
you know how it started, right? I don't know. Do you know the whole story behind why people think that? Right. There was these commercials in the 90s. Probably
and early 2000s.
Oh yeah, early 2000s. And probably inspired by movies like Crocodile Dundee, all that stuff. And they would have an Australian narrator, and it would be like something you hear the didgeridoo in the background, and then it'd be at the end of the commercial it'd say Foster's Australian for beer. And so
That's a pretty good accent. I like that.
It imprinted in every American's minds that everybody in Australia drinks Foster's, that there's no other beer. And so whenever we have an Australian on the show, I always have to ask, Foster's, is it a good beer, mate?
I'm pretty sure.
None have said at all.
There you go.
I get Victoria a lot. They mentioned Victoria a lot.
VB, yeah.
VB, that's it. Yeah, VB.
Yeah, VB's okay, but I'm from Sydney, so I have a preference that is not VB, but VB's right.
But before you head out, KZT, we just want to give you an opportunity. Plug your social media. Plug.
Actually, Andrew, I got a couple of more questions.
Oh, I'm sorry, Christian. Sorry, do you have time? Do you have time, KZT?
Oh yeah.
Okay, sorry, Christian. Go ahead.
First of all, obviously, you came from a non-traditional background when it comes down to getting into combat sports. I mean, I always like to ask these questions, if you have a backup plan or a plan B, but if you didn't get into the world of combat sports, would you still be considered an artiste? Would you still be in the world of, graphic design if you weren't, getting into the world of combat sports?
I would undoubtedly say that it is in every single fiber of my being that I am like an artist, and that I am constantly finding new outlets to be creative. So yes, without well, I mean, it technically is my day job. So yes.
I see. About this fight coming up with Janai Kai, my apologies. I mean, what's the one thing you can say that, apart from strengths and weaknesses, what's the one thing that you can basically say that you two share the same as far as skill set wise?
I think we're both absolute technicians in our respective fields, and that's what we bring to the table, is that we're absolutely going to put on a showcase of what we know best. And yeah, that's it, I guess.
What's the one thing that fans can hope to, whether they're coming to Bloodsport to see you compete or see others compete, what's the one thing you hope that fans can enjoy from this show?
Just a grueling display of what we love to do, which is fight across the board. I think that's probably, I'm, taking a step and speaking for everyone on the card, but I think that's what we all love to do, and that's what we're going to do on the night of April the 8th in Tampa, Florida.
Actually, I'm sorry to interrupt, Christian. I all this talk about art, creative design, got me thinking. I don't know if you remember a few years ago, Mel Streep at I think it was the Golden Globes. She had said that mixed martial arts is not an art. I know it's been a few years since she said that, and we ranted on the show many times about it, but I want to get your thoughts as somebody who is a martial artist and who's an artist. What do you think about a comment like that, or a statement?
I will say that she, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure she's never stepped foot inside a dojo or a ring for that matter to make such a claim. So I'm not going to even like
Probably not.
I'm not going to give it any energy because
not.
she's not speaking from any experience. And I can say that I am speaking from experience when I say that I'm pretty well versed in, being a martial artist as well as a designer and a graphic artist and everything else. And it absolutely 110% is an art. So anyone who wants to disagree with me can come fight me.
Actually, what's the interesting thing is why she said that statement, because they were talking about the diversity of Hollywood. They were, I think they were like celebrating like black artists, women artists, all that stuff. And then she somehow transitioned that mixed martial arts not art when, I can name more Brazilians that are pro MMA fighters than actors, full Brazilians, not like half Brazilian, half whatever, as well as, many more, I'll definitely say it's definitely more MMA fighters of Asian background than actors who are, unfortunately subjugated to just a lot of times just one specific role. While, in mixed martial arts, you got people there's karate, jiu-jitsu, taekwondo, they could be anything, as opposed to Hollywood where, this is the industry I work, where unfortunately, Aquafina is always going to be known as a funny girl. She's going to be the funny Asian girl. That's going to be her career, unfortunately. And I guess, if you find your niche, but if she wants to expand upon that, she may not be able to. While, in martial arts, you know what? You grew up doing the jiu-jitsu. You know what? Maybe I'll take up taekwondo. You can do that. You can transition. You can easily transition to martial arts. It may take a little while, but at least there's that leeway. There's that open. You can do that as opposed to in Hollywood. I apologize. I went on that rant again somewhat. So that's my fault.
Andrew. You can just basically chalk this down as us shooting the shit.
Yeah,
I'm enjoying it. So hey,
what is it? What do you say? And also, you're enjoying taking the piss? Is that what?
Taking the piss? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. Taking the piss or shooting the shit. But before we close things out, and obviously we'll let you get your plugs in, we'll let you put yourself over as much as you can. But let's just say, if Janai Kai is listening to this interview or watching this interview right now, what would be the main thing you would tell her as if you guys were, face to face at a stare down, trying to psych each other up?
Watch your neck.
Short, sweet, to the point.
Yep.
Well, let me expand upon that. The front of the neck or the back of the neck, or all points?
All definitions.
Because listen, there's some people who can do a great rear naked choke, but once they can't get wrap a guillotine or a dart.
Oh no, it comes from all angles.
Okay. I'm gonna be watching this now. I'm gonna be watching, making sure that Janai Kai. We'll have to see if she leaves her neck open. But I'm sorry, Christian. I'll give you the closeout.
Okay. Do you have any social media platforms people can contact you on?
Yep, just at Hey Karen Turan, Instagram, Twitter, also.com, where you can see more of my professional work on there. If you need a motion graphics designer, heykarenturan.com. But
to clarify as well, I apologize for interrupting, but there's another Karen Tran that when you look up your name, who's a wedding designer, or she's whatever,
famous apparently.
Yes,
because when I went to buy my.com, I was like, damn it, this bitch.
don't contact her and be like, oh, just design my shirt or be on my pro wrestling show. She's gonna have no idea what you're talking about. Make sure it's
Hey Karen Tran.
Yes, and you see KZT, because or you'll wind up on like TLC network or something. And be like, how
considering the fact that Pro Wrestling Tees loves to make mock design shirts, you should probably have like a Pro Wrestling T-shirt that just has you in
surrounded by flowers.
I'm not trying to say bridal gear, but have you in have you like in a bridesmaid gear just ripping shit up.
That would be quite funny. I think it would be a little bit too specific and niche, and maybe like one person might buy it. But hey, I'll keep it in mind for like when I blow up and just take over the world. So, but just like on a parting note, so KZT is actually a trinication of like what my friends called me back home, which is either Kaza, Kaz, or Kazi, and so KZT is what a lot of people refer me to as. And so moving away from the stigma of being a Karen, I started introducing myself more as a Kazi to people. So that's how KZT evolved. In case you were wondering. I know you didn't ask, but there you go.
You know what? Considering the recent rise of the Karens worldwide, that's considered a good thing for you to differentiate yourself.
Wear your damn mask, damn it. Like, I'm just going to say that.
It's so funny. We actually used to say on the show, but I didn't realize that it was a dead point. You know what? That it just, people were going to wear their masks whether they wanted to or not. And I was just like, Christian, I was just like so tired of it. I was just like, whatever. Go ahead, do it. I don't care anymore. It's just because whatever. Because nobody.
I would just say I've not had a cold or flu in a year, and I usually get sick at least 3 or 4 times. So, just saying.
Mm-hmm.
Shit, I was sick 6 times last year. I'm surprised I didn't get COVID yet.
I'm actually surprised as well. Yeah, I haven't gotten the cold as well. I usually get like one. That one cold in between like summer and spring.
Yeah.
It didn't happen. Did not happen so far.
Knock on wood that it's not going to happen.
I got some more. Here's some close to
there you go.
Hopefully it doesn't happen this year as well. But Karen, KZT, Kaz, we're very happy to see that you're going to be on Bloodsport. We're really looking forward to your fight. I'm really interested to see Taekwondo versus Jiu-Jitsu. The styles make fights, as they say.
Absolutely.
And you'll be in Florida. Please stay safe. Florida's a little bit of a crazy state. So
Florida's basically, Florida, Texas, my home state, and Mississippi are basically shitholes right now.
So try, be safe while you're down there, but regardless, actually, sorry, curious to know, are you doing any other things for WrestleMania weekend that week, or is it just Bloodsport?
Nope, just Bloodsport.
Okay,
so
got it.
All my energy is going to that, so.
Okay. And come to think of it, one more question. What's the one thing that you would what's the one word you would say to describe this Bloodsport card coming up on WrestleMania weekend? On WrestleMania week, even though we're a ways away from it.
One word, brutal.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Understood. And with that in mind, Josh Barnett's Bloodsport 6, you'll see KZT versus Janai Kai. You'll see Rocky Romero versus Chavo Guerrero Jr. You'll see John Moxley versus Josh Barnett. Finally! And you'll see a bunch of other stuff that you may not be disappointed in. And that's all coming up on April the 9th. Well, actually, April the 8th, live on Fight TV. Check your local listings for time in your area and be sure to pay up because you don't want to miss out on this incredible, incredible combat action. But other than that, thanks for the time, KZT. We enjoy your presence.
Thank you so much for having me on, guys.